That was wrong. All right, everyone, welcome to the first keynote of the day. There's 4 people going on right now, and we're first, so I'm going to strike this as a keynote. It's going to go officially on the resume, so I feel like I can use it. So we're going to talk about 8 lessons clients teach us every single day. If you want, feel free to tweet while you go. My handle is Lynn Winter, MN. That's right, Minnesota, because I was really late getting my Twitter handle. So now I can never move out of Minnesota, which makes me a little sad. I'm Lynn. I have been managing people, projects, and processes for 17 years, first in the television industry. Then I moved over to digital and Drupal in 2008. I also do things like content strategy, user experience, QA, and kind of like a jack of all trades kind of situation. And I just recently left my job on Friday, so I'm in the new freelance kind of world as of this week. I'm also 100% German. I think that's just important full disclosure situation. So I like things very organized and specific. And if you're around town, I shoot sports. So if you're ever at one of the arenas like the Wild, Vikings or something, need your kids on fan cam, come bug me. Also tell me like we met, because I always like people say hi and I'm like, what? So we can get you on camera for that too. I have 2 kids too. Bennett just turned 5 and Isabel will be 8 in a couple of weeks. We're going to do an American Ninja Warrior party. I'm pretty excited about that. Right? Because it's going to be amazing. I'm going to push all the kids out of the way and go, and it's going to be awesome. But I want to tell you a little story about Isabel before we get started. She was born at 7/8/09 at 4:32 in the afternoon. You see how this German thing comes into play? I was also born at 4:32 in the afternoon, so just a weird coincidence. She grew up, as they do when they're little children. She learned how to fish. I did not teach her that. She had a little brother, which you could probably have guessed. And she became kind of really opinionated, sassy, loud, and really fun, probably a little too much like myself. So my husband's going to be really mad when she becomes a teenager someday. And then a couple years back, she started first grade. And before this time, things were going really well. She was doing really good academically. Her teacher loved her. She had a lot of spunk, so they had to contain her. But it was going pretty well. And then we got a first grade teacher. And she didn't like school so much. And I went to the fall conference, and it was okay. She just said she was a little disruptive. And I said, we'll get a little more rules and more guidelines to kick her out of class if she's being bad. Okay. And then I didn't hear from her for about 6 months. We hit the spring conference, which if you're a parent, you know you have like 15 minutes. You sit on a little tiny chair where you feel like you're going to break it. And then the other parent's sitting out the door waiting, listening to the entire conversation. So the teacher sat me down and said, well, it's not good. And I'm like, okay. So I immediately felt like I was in trouble. And she said, well, she's not doing her work. She's falling way behind in math and reading, and she's disruptive. And I was like, freaking out. And she said, which I'll never forget, I think you should go see a pediatrician. Now, it's not a problem if my kid has learning disorder and needs some help. Not a problem at all. But I got really pissed, and I don't know when I'm going to stop being emotional about it, maybe in like 10 years. But I got really mad because she hasn't talked to me in 6 months. So I was really quiet, and she said, what are you thinking? And I'm thinking like the parent's right there listening, and I've got 2 minutes. I said, you know what? I'm really pissed. We haven't talked in 6 months, and the 2 adults in here can't have a conversation before you decide she needs to go to a doctor. Well, we finished out the year. She got to know my kid a little more. It wasn't great, but we moved on from that situation. But what I realized is that I wasn't as mad at her as mad at me and my husband, mostly myself. Because there are clear project signs. I project managed my whole life in some capacity or another. It's so obvious. She wasn't engaged. I wasn't talking to the teacher. And she wasn't getting her stuff done, even though she was shoving them in her desk and I had no idea. But it was obvious. So just a little life lesson of things where you can see these things over and over. And just because I was a first-time parent with my first kid, I can see these things. And I kind of think about that when it comes to our projects and clients. We can see this stuff. And we keep going in this cycle over and over. So it kind of inspired me to the talk today talking about 8 different things that we see over and over that we can just go, oh, okay, I can make an adjustment. So my goal is probably these won't be, you know, earth-shattering, like you have these issues too, but maybe some things we can change to make them eliminated from our projects. The first one is really that clients must pick us from the start. You have to be chosen. And that doesn't mean they Googled and said, oh, I want to work with you. That means they pick from a number of candidates after careful thought. There's really a process going into it to make sure they pick us. And the reason why is if they're just picking willy-nilly, there's no relationship there. There is no trust. And I have never worked on a project that was successful, and successful meaning happy client, good product, without trust. If it's not there from the start, it's done. If it's there from the start, you can either keep it or lose it, but you have a chance. So some warning signs are, there's no competition. So you're going into a sales process and there's no one competing against. Maybe they got you a reference from someone else in the organization or someone else they know, and they just want to work with you. You need to talk to lots of people to make sure you're going to choose us, the right people. Maybe they're like, oh, you know, our deadline's really fast. Let's just do this real fast. Okay, great. Let me sign the contract. And they rush that sales process so fast, you're not having the right conversations. Another one is they don't have time to answer questions. So say you're a developer and you're trying to come up with an estimate and you've got questions about what they really want to do going forward. But if they don't want to answer them or like, oh, we haven't talked about that. Well, we'll figure it out later. That's also a big sign. That's a problem. Another one is if there's only one person you're talking to from the organization. Now, if it's a 2-3 person company, no big deal. But if there's 10, 20, 30 people, you should be meeting with more than one person. Otherwise, you're only getting maybe trust from one person and not the rest of the team. Also, if you get a partial job, so say that the scope of their work, you can do all of those things well, but they think you can only do one thing well. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to bleed that lack of trust right into the rest of the thing that you're doing. So it's important that you're going to be able to do all the things that you're really good at doing. So, like I said, you can't ever get trust back, but let's pretend that you're now on a project team and you don't have a choice and you have this client. Let's pretend it's not too late. So some things to maybe get you on a better footing is that you should just sell yourself again. Take that kickoff meeting and spend like 10, 15 minutes to talk about really who's in the room, why are they amazing, you know, what work have you done, how great your process is, and do a little salesmanship to get everyone kind of excited about you. You're going to need to reset expectations. Anytime I've worked on a project that has gone really fast in sales or doesn't have that trust relationship, the clients tend to have things in their head that they decided you're going to do for them, and they don't tell you. And so you really need to reset, like, what do you think you're going to get from this? What are we doing? Let's get on the same page there. It's also important to learn their business. Well, you might be thinking, of course you're going to learn their business. That's part of the project. But go beyond the steps that you normally do. Whether you need to do stakeholder interviews this time, something to get you a little more into what they're doing so that they feel like you're going the extra mile for them. Also try to understand why each of the people on the stakeholder team is doing this. You know, what is their own individual motivation? Is it to please their boss? Is it to learn about Drupal? What makes them tick to make the project go well? And also get to know them as a person, you know. Do they have kids? Do they go hiking? Do they like music? Maybe there's some connection you can make with them because people hire friends, you know. You have good relationships with people that you connect with. So taking that angle is important. Also, let's be careful of those repeat buyers, the people that have already worked with you. So where I used to work, there were some people that loved us, and there's some people that are like, nah, but it's easy just to stay with you. So when you come back around to that next redesign project, you don't really want someone to be like, I'll work with you because you're, that's not so great. So we need to resell ourselves, right? We don't need to pretend like, oh, we got it in the bag. They're going to just sign it because we're here. No, they're hopefully looking at other people because they want to make the best partnership and best project. So you need to go out and resell why you're awesome. You also have to set clear budget, timeline, scope. I think there's a tendency that when you've worked with someone, you're like, oh yeah, we'll figure out later, or yeah, we'll just do hourly and it's fine. Well, maybe their budget or situation has changed there. Maybe someone new is on the project team. You can't just assume it's the exact same, and that's when you kind of get in trouble and it gets a little goofy. It's also good to really talk about what went well and what was bad. You know, even if you're super happy, there's things you can get better at, and it gives everyone an opportunity to get things off their chest that maybe you never had a clue that it was driving them nuts. So have that kind of pre-mortem kind of conversation, essentially. And then if they're really still about you, go make them get other bids. Like my sales team would have killed me for saying that, but you know, it's not going to be a good project because essentially you're probably going to go over budget. Everyone's going to be cranky, and if they're a bad reference for you, that's worse than anything being out in this digital space with that. So suggest that they go do other bids, because maybe they'll come back and they say, oh, you know what, you're not so bad. You know, we're not going to just stick with you because, you know, we know you. Lesson number 2, people gravitates to people who have smarts and be smarty pants. So what's always interesting to me is that when you take a team, so I had a team of 11 people at my last job, and you put them in a room, and so you might have one developer who's like the hardcore, amazing Drupal developer, and then you might have one in the middle that's like, okay and good, but man, they can just talk, and they can talk to you and educate you and that, and all of a sudden the client just listens to them only, and that they're focused in here, and then that person over here just doesn't have an opinion and can't kind of drive the project. And so I found that, you know, trying to figure out where you are on the project team and making sure that you're the center of it, now, like, not the center of like, everyone look at me and I'm really important, but how do you make sure that you're one of the key people on the project team so you can fill in and be active in the team? I find with project managers, it's always very hard because you're often just like the budget person and timelines, and you have nothing to say about the scope, and you really just need to get in the middle and, you know, is your thing accessibility, is your thing analytics, what is it that you can bring to the team so you're not just the person over here that the client just has to call or something. So make sure that you are a key contributor so you're not irrelevant. Now you might be like, I'm excited, I'm an introvert, and I don't want anyone to talk to me, so that works for me, and that's totally fine. But I think everyone should have kind of a little tiny niche past what their job role is. So think about what your passion is. For me, it really came in with user experience and content strategy. That became kind of my space when I used to be a project manager. And I really think that brought me into having conversations and having things to say to the developer and the designers that they would maybe listen to me. So specialize in something not only you want to be in, but the client cares about. Always provide unsolicited advice. You know, we're reading articles all the time. Like, if you see something that's awesome, send it to a client. They'll just like make them super happy that day. Make confident decisions. So if you're a little nervous, like, make a decision. You can always change it later, but that confidence in front of a client really makes them build trust in you. And challenge them. Nobody wants, you know, everyone just to agree with everything they say. If they do, they're probably a bad client anyway, but like, challenge them. Give them ideas, push them, and then make small talk. So I think this is like the biggest area that makes big impact that people hate doing. So, you know, so you do that conference call and everyone just sits there and then everyone's like, all right, I'm just going to put you in mute. I'll put you in mute. And then you've wasted 5 to 10 minutes while everyone gets on that you could be forming relationships. And it's the after thing when people are leaving. So take the time, even if you're an introvert and don't like to do that, say, hey, you know, how's your weekend? Or what are you going to do for the 4th of July? And just throw that out there and kind of start building that relationship. Lesson number 3, we must all be teachers. So I want to get hands up here. So you got to be active for a minute. Hands up if you've ever launched a website. And you don't have to do it like manually launch it, but been part of website launch. Okay, now hands down if you've only done, hands up. Hands down if you've only done 1. 5, 10, 20, 30. Okay, so a lot, right? We've done a lot of website things. So if you think about in 3 things, launching websites, if you think about a 3 to 4, 5 year timeline, which is tends to be what people relaunch a full website, our clients have probably done 1. So much stuff changes in that many times. It's kind of freaking me out. Like, how can I catch up on my Twitter feed? What do I need to read about next? I need to know about this and this and this. Can you imagine having to do your job all the time that has nothing to do with web? And then coming in and being able to be really smart about launching your one website for your organization that everyone is going to look at you and your job might depend on it. It's super scary. So I think it's up to us to assume our clients don't know anything. And not in a way like they're idiots, because we're not, but in a way that we maybe have read more or done stuff more recently that can provide that information. So let's not just assume they know this, this, and this. Let's talk about it. Let's educate it. Let's train all the way through an entire project. And I think that's important because we're part of an open source community, right? That's kind of the point of Drupal. We're sharing, we're learning from each other. It's open for everyone. And for people sitting in the audience that are project managers and going, well, that's great. How much more time is this going to take me? That's going to cost too much in the budget. It's not really. You don't have to put 20 hours into this, but maybe you put 4 more hours or 8 more hours in. And what that will do is maybe make your project go smoother, so then you won't go 1 or 2 months over, and it will balance out, because the longer your project goes, the more PM time you use. So if you shorten it up by getting the client on the same page, it saves money. So how do we do this? Well, first, back to the motivation. We got to know why they're doing this, right? So if you take the client contact, why do they want to do this website? That's what we need to train to, because if they don't care about some stuff, we don't want to be training and teaching about that. We always want to be explaining why we're doing things. You know, why do we do this step? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Otherwise, we're just going through steps. So really explaining all the whys and reasoning behind things. We need to make sure that people learn differently. So people do podcasts, people read articles, people go to seminars. We're at a conference right now. Everyone does it differently, so finding out the clients what gets them going, like maybe, you know, next time there's the conference here, you know, clients are going through this process, they come here, and this will help them get into it a little more. Maybe everyone needs to read a book about content strategy. Whatever it is, figure out the best way they learn together. And then also provide some hands-on experiences. So when you're doing training, make them bring their content, and then sit in there, have them put their real content into the site, and then walk through the page. All right, we're going to look through Paul's page here. Let's talk about, somebody give me some reasons why this is really good. Okay, now let's talk about why this isn't good. Okay, maybe we should move the header down here. It's not very scannable. The words are too long. Have them kind of learn and process that way. Another thing would be usability testing. You know, sitting right in on user testing, hearing users say, oh, this doesn't make sense, or I wanted to do this over here. That gets people really involved and processing in the project. Lesson number 4, clients are humans. Anybody read Us Weekly? Come on. Okay, well, I don't unless I'm at an airport. I hate flying, and so I grab a trashy magazine and then have a bunch of movies I watch. And when they're on the speaker talking to you the whole time because you don't know how to buckle a seatbelt again, I'm reading this magazine. And I love this page where it talks about how stars are just like us because they get takeout and they pay their parking. And I think that's amazing. That makes it to a magazine. But I do feel like this is kind of a little bit of that relationship between clients and contractors, contractors and clients. There's like some sort of like weird divide sometimes. And it turns out we're all, you know, the same, and that means we all have lives outside of work, which means we're humans. We have personal lives, and shit happens. Serious shit happens. In fact, I've gone through all of these, except for one, and I bet you can guess which one, with clients before over my time. This stuff happens, and when it happens in the middle of a project, it's really hard. It's really hard. So if you didn't guess, number 4 is the one I haven't been through yet. Imprisonment. Yeah. A couple stories on that. So we were working with a client, and things were going really well. We were 1/3 halfway through, and all of a sudden she kind of got a little cranky, a little kind of cranky. Not really easy to work with. Wasn't delivering stuff. And I was kind of annoyed and complaining and this and that. It's like, what is her problem? Well, we got on the phone, and it turns out she was pregnant. And her oldest child was just finishing high school, and they weren't planning on it. While they were eventually happy and overjoyous, it was a very stressful time for them. And that changed the entire way she was approaching the project. And I thought, stupid me, I didn't even think about things happening in your personal life. I'm so sorry about that. Let's figure out how to work around that. Another project where we did a project with them first and went really well, and 4 or 5 years later they're ready to do it again. They had a real deadline. They're launching a big event and they had to have it done then. And this person was impossible to get a hold of. I was so irate because it's like I had a real deadline, I had to get it done. just couldn't do it. And she was being super nice, but just couldn't get anything done. And finally she sat me on the phone and told me that her husband had cancer. And I felt like a big jerk. So the thing is, this stuff happens, right? You know, people lose their jobs, people have kids, people go through divorces, and it can happen during projects that make it very difficult. One year we had 9 babies. 9 babies in 1 year. It's a lot of babies. And I think 2 years ago there was like 4 deaths, like family-related deaths. So it just changes things. And I wish it didn't happen during projects because it's really hard for them. But I think we need to think about how can we see it and then change how we do that. So I always like to think of us as partners, not contractors. But beyond that, maybe going to being a friend. If we know people well enough, and I'm not saying we have to be like on Facebook together or go to picnics, but if we know people a little more about their personal life, we can kind of make a change in how we react to things. So essentially, we just need to be someone, we want to enjoy being around them. That makes sense, right? And then we want to support them in a non-hostile way. I love how that's the definition. So what does that look like? Well, we shouldn't make promises we can't meet, right? So like I say things are going to get done and we don't do them. A developer says that, it doesn't happen. That's not cool. That's not cool from the client side too. Like friends don't do that. We don't disappear. We don't disappear for months. Or, oh, I'll get that stuff back to you and I don't know how to answer that. Or can we forward that? I don't know, I'll just put it over here. We don't do that either. We don't just tell them what they want to hear to make them feel good. We don't require them to pay for lunch. So what I mean by that is, you know, if we screw up, I'm not going to make my client pay for that. If the client screw up, they shouldn't make me pay for that. It's about taking responsibility. So it's not a running clock, and as a friend, I'm not going to screw you over. We're going to be there for each other. And the minute we also start talking about the contract, we're done. There'll never be a relationship or partnership, because if we have to pull the contract out and say, here in line 4, blah, 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 it's not going to work. So things we can do is get to know them, right? Ask about them, maybe have lunch with them sometime. Visit their home, and by home I mean their office, right? Because we spend more time at our offices if we work in a physical space than our houses. So go see their space, get a tour. Maybe you're working with a manufacturing company. What are they making? How do they do that? Who are their employees? Get to know them that way. For the project manager on the client side, be their wingman, be there for them. Like, they're going through a tough time, cover their butt, like help them out, because they can't help some of that stuff. And then help them grow as a person. That's that education piece. Respect their opinion, but always be honest. Item number 5, be your process. All right, here's a website, the company I used to work at that builds way before my time. So this is maybe 8, 9 years old. It's for a tiny little company doing stuff with churches. And they came back to us a year or 2 ago and said, we want to redo this, but we're tiny, we don't have much money, can you help us? So, well, they're a really nice client, of course we want to help them. So we thought, well, we'll just change our process. We'll just cut it down, we'll do these things. Okay, go, they need it right away, let's go. So we did wireframes and sitemap and all the blah-de-blah of our tiny little process, and we came up with a new design. I went to the meeting, and the guy hated it, absolutely hated it. He was really pissed. And all the feedback really had nothing to do with the design. It was relationship stuff, it was process, it was really weird. So we left the meeting and said something like, oh yeah, we'll do a revision, we'll see what you think. And we left and met internally and said, I don't even know what we'd revise, I don't know what he's frustrated about. So it occurred to me that we need to get on the phone with him. So we got on the phone with him, talked to him, and then came back with another design. And it looked like this. So hopefully you can see the mass differences. And he loved it. He absolutely loved it. It was amazing. So what happened on the phone call? Well, I realized that we never communicated our process to him. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what he was making approvals on. And it kind of freaked him out. So we didn't define it. We didn't tell him why we were doing it. And we didn't show him where he was. Here, you are here. You're going to make this. After this, we're going to do this. Here we go. And it was so basic. But we just thought, oh yeah, we can just do weird things with our process to make this all work for you. And then it ended up costing us more money because we were back talking to him and making him happy and figuring this stuff out. It all ended up fine, but it's a lot of time to waste to go from here to here, you know? So shame on us. So the key is, though, it's not about the specific steps, because I bet every single one of us has a different process. It's about why we're doing those steps and how, and then explaining them. Because it doesn't matter. I could sell any process. I could flip the process that I believe in right now and do something different. I could just sell it, show how it works. Clients would be on board. So it's really us understanding why do we care to do it, and then making sure that everyone can see it. Our clients, the rest of our staff, everybody's on the same page. And really, we have to understand it and find the value, and we can't regurgitate it. I've seen a lot of project managers talk about their Scrum process and Agile, and it's like standard out of the book process. But the problem is clients are different, projects are different, teams are different. I went from one company to another company. The same process didn't work at all. You have to change it to the people that are on the team. So you have to understand why you do things and then grow with it. I was having kind of a challenge where I used to work with training manuals. There was no training manual. We started doing them, and I started seeing PMs spend way less time on the phone explaining how to use the website. I saw clients stop complaining, and they were like literally saying like, oh, you didn't give us training. I'm like, whoa, you mean that meeting that said training, and then you guys showed up with your laptops? They didn't even realize they had training, so I saw a lot of value in it. The developers hated writing user manuals, so they didn't want to do that. So we'll see if they continue to do that now. But there's a lot of value in that, and I have to make them see that value, otherwise it doesn't make any sense, because that won't be translated to the client in the meetings. Lesson number 6, you must commit first. So there's a lot of freedom, especially for project managers, but for teams, you can choose when you have deliverables, you can choose what they are, you can choose how you communicate to the client. I came from PBS, where shows air at a certain time, so everything back times, and it's super strict. And then I went to digital, so I took my little PBS hat and I moved it over there, and I said, here was how we're going to deliver. And it added a lot of pressure to the team, and it was really annoying, and it was a lot of pressure. So I said, oh, I don't want my team to be mad. I want to be super flexible. Let's just make up dates as we go. I'll tell the client a date when I'm ready, and it'll be great. And then the client stopped committing to anything and never delivered anything. We're like, oh, that makes sense. Because I kind of wanted my cake to eat it too. I wanted to have no commitment my end, but make the clients commit to me. It didn't work out so well. So you got to find a middle in the focus. You have to find the right spot for yourselves to commit to things or not commit. But the key is that we have to commit before our clients commit, because they follow the pattern. If I just start not giving any deadlines for the first month, they'd be like, oh, I see how this works. I'll do the stuff when I'm ready to do the stuff, but you're still going to get it done in this timeline, right? So committing early is important, and then putting it in writing. It has to be written. It has to be very clear and shared with all the stakeholders. So what you do is you create timelines, and I start by setting a kickoff date, finding out how hard that was to make it, figure out how many people show up, and how painful it is. Do they start getting out their schedule? I'm like, hey, can you meet in a couple days? Can you meet next week? Oh, no. Okay, that's how they're going to work. Or like, hey, yeah, we can meet next week. Okay. Then I make a schedule for the entire discovery and design phase and get that set in stone. I can make those dates. That's only 3 dates my team's got to meet. We can do that. And if we are worried that the client's not going to give us feedback, well, then I'll get some flexibility in there. We can always deliver early. But I don't want to give my client more than 3 to 5 days to review anything, because if they have longer than that, they ain't going to look at anything for like 3-4 days. Just like when you send out a survey, you don't give someone 2 weeks to do a survey. No one's going to do the survey for a week. So I do that, and I set the timelines as I go. So as you get into the planning, then you set the design timeline. Then you get into design, you set the build and launch timeline. So set it as you go and make sure the commitments are clear. And then you got to make them, right? I also, to make a commitment, I share the budget. I started doing this a long time ago. I make an internal budget that I track and project all my things on, and I share the exact same document externally. I don't really care. It's not pretty. I don't make it look different. I just want to be really transparent on how we're spending the hours. That way, I'm responsible for saying we're in trouble, we're not in trouble. The client's responsible for asking questions. And so it's very clear, and I'm committing to showing you how I'm going to do that. What's interesting is, I don't know if, how long have I been doing that? Maybe like 5 years. I've maybe been asked once about a line item that I've been spending in. So it's not a situation where, oh, they're going to say this, or they're going to do that. Like, you have that trust, It actually makes it much easier than when you don't show it and now you're in a budget problem and how are you going to talk about it because they haven't seen anything. We also want to reconfirm the scope, so we're committing to X scope. So if you're working in a waterfall type fashion, I'm sure people are, and we don't want to talk about it, or a water gile fashion, you're going to have only so much money to do a project, right? So make sure you write down the things that are in scope and out of scope. So anything that brought up in sales, anything in a contract, anything whispered in the hallway, I heard these things, we're not doing those. Here it is in writing, okay, unless you want to do more money. Okay, and then it's very clear and everyone can see it. And finally, if you need to, grab some pizza and the whole team takes a long night to get to the commitment. Now, it's the project manager's job not to make that happen every single project launch, but it's also the teams to support the project manager so when they screw up, the site can get done and the client is committed to it and doesn't blow the rest of the timeline. All right, item 7, people quit. Anyone like the Olympics? Would you be un-American if you don't like the Olympics? All right, well, this picture is from Athens, 2004. Does anyone remember who came on the scene in Summer Olympics that year? Nope. Think swimming. Yes. Michael Phelps came on the scene. He was a young kid, maybe 18 then. He won 6 gold medals, 2 bronze, and broke like every record in the world. So that was when he started, which is crazy because that's 13 years ago. I, as a kid, and still now, like sit and watch Olympics straight for like 2 weeks and all the weird things like table tennis and stuff, and now my kids are like, why are you, like they don't understand why I watch these weird things, but it's like, it's Olympics, that's what you do. But I remember as a kid watching the marathon, right? Because that's really exciting. It goes for hours, they're just running, people bike next to them. And there's this woman named Paula Radcliffe that was running. And I watched this whole thing. She was favored to win. She's British, she's 30 years old. And she was going for the goal. And so the marathon is 26.2 miles, so I probably have about 20 more miles of train for it. And she got to the 3-mile mark, or 3-mile left mark, right? We can see the stadium where everyone's running to the main stadium in Greece. And she was ahead of everybody. So she had it. Oh, she has it, blah, blah, blah. The announcer's doing it. And I actually watched this back on YouTube recently, which is hilarious because of the TV quality. But yeah, she's running. She's got it, right? And then what happened? She stopped. She literally took a step, stopped, and sat down and didn't move. And it was just amazing to hear the commentary. The Guardian wrote, but in that moment she was alone with her bewilderment. The spectators lining the road could offer her nothing except silent sympathy. And so after a handful of strides, she stopped again, sat down on the grass, and wept. And she sat there. And then like the camera people didn't know, like, do I stay with her? Do I follow the people in front? And then everyone just went off and left. And they picked her up in a car and took her away, and she never ran another step. So this is the same thing as a website. Same situation, right? So if an Olympian who trains for how many years, like quits 3 miles at the end because her body physically can't do it, like that makes sense in projects. So I'm sure everyone's had a project where a client disappears off the face of the earth, right? Or maybe you're the client that's done that, hopefully not. But clients just quit. And I thought about this a long time. It bothers me. Like, I'm in, I can do it, even though it's not like my favorite project, let's go. But clients are kind of set up to fail, right? If you're not working with a really, really big company, a lot of people are doing this on the side. They're not like the marketing person or web. They're just like the person that draws the straw. I was working with a client that the project's just been going on for 9 months, and it's one of the 5 partners that literally drew the short stick. Like, yeah, well, I got it. They just put it on my plate. I don't know anything. What's navigation again? It's not her fault. Super, super nice lady, but like, she's not set up to do it. So people are super busy. It's not their job. It's scary if you don't know what you're doing, and all the hopes are falling on it. So I feel like that a soft spot has grown in this versus just frustration on it. So what can we do about it? Because the only thing that happens when projects stall is they cost us more money. Just expensive. And it feels gross. You know, I don't even care if it costs like 8 more hours or $1,000, even though I'm probably in trouble, but I don't want someone to feel like this project wasn't good at the end of it. So it's back to that motivation again. Motivation. What drives these people? How can we help? And then at the beginning of the project, ask people, like, what scares you about this? What are you really worried about with this project? You know, where do you feel like you're kind of underqualified for? It's okay. We're not all good at everything. Help them kind of stand out and shine, give them a little support in front of people. And then when that silence goes to 2 emails and 2 phone calls and it's not happening, you just got to show up at their office. Like, you know, I was in the area, because you already know where they are. I was in the area, just wanted to drop off something, just wanted to see how you are you busy? Oh. The other thing I like to do is publicly shame, and by that I mean, like, that sounds way worse than I really mean it. But, like, if you have a client project manager and they just are dying, copy their coworkers on an email, or their boss on an email, or in Basecamp. Add more people, and don't be rude about it, but just say, hey, we haven't seen this yet, you know, what's going on? And maybe if the rest of the team's accountable, they can maybe pull that person back up, because maybe they're not trying to be rude as much as they've got so much on their other job, or they're really just scared and don't know what they're supposed to be doing. The other thing is maybe just do their work. Maybe you're like 20 pages away from being entered into the website, and then you can launch. Just go start entering that content, because that PM time and constantly thinking about the project is going to cost more money. And then something I haven't tried, but I find interesting now that I worked more with for-profit recently. I used to only work with nonprofits, but maybe charging some sort of fee. Like, if you disappear for 3 months, you will be charged $500 to start up, because you got to update modules, you got to get the team back into it, nobody even knows what's going on, and then you have to take your schedule and you have to rearrange the whole schedule. Like, what's that cost to you, and why should you absorb it if there's no more project hours? So there's something maybe in there that is worthwhile to motivate the right kind of client. But the key is to identify that it's a problem before they disappear. And then if they do disappear and it's been way too long, maybe just say goodbye, and then they can come back when they're ready. At some sort of like 6-month mark, just say goodbye, get the money per dollars and hours you've been working, and then just restart up when they're ready. Because maybe they are going through a tough time. All right, the final one, trust your instincts. So who lives in Minnesota here, or somewhere really cold? Yes, right? It's amazing. It's so pretty in the winter, right? There's like activities to do, like snowboarding and stuff. And then my husband used to do whip shitties on a lake, which is really weird. But he's from Wisconsin, so, and the town is like 1,000 people. So, I mean, to be fair, that's probably safer than doing other things. And then we go outside and get family portraits done without coats and drink hot cocoa and things like that. I hate Minnesota winters. This is how it looks to me. And it's cold, and I don't like to go out, and my kids like to sled every day, and I don't, so my husband goes out with him. I'm a little ashamed to say that, but I did. And I don't really like it, but I kind of keep thinking that it's not a big deal, right? Because it wasn't so bad last year, right? We didn't have much snow. I can't even remember. You just tell yourself, oh, it wasn't bad because it wasn't 30 inches, so we got out of our driveway. You know, or I could change. I could start skiing on the little hills we have here. Like, I can do that. Or it'll be different. It's going to be different. So it's kind of a silly analogy to basically say that clients and projects don't really change. Your instincts as a developer, as manager, as a project manager, designer are right on. And really trusting that is really important. Now, the key is that we don't sit in back at our desks and kind of just wallow in it and complain and get frustrated, which I'm a little guilty of doing over time, because once you get started, you get started. So, okay, find the red flag, raise your hand if you've already started the project, then figure out how can you make it manageable. What are you going to do to make it different so that it doesn't become the same thing? And maybe you're drinking and laying on the ground, but how do you deal with it? You know, have a 5-minute bitch session and then pick yourself up and figure out how it is. But the key is don't say that, oh, it's going to be different this time. No, it's the exact same situation. You've seen it before. So what are you going to do about it? Every time we do that, it goes over budget. Okay, let's talk to them. Let's figure out the finances before we even get there. So try to just make that change. But if you have that, like, even if it's not your role in the team, stand up and say something and make that change. So that is it for the lessons. Clients need to pick you. People gravitate to smarty pants people. You must teach. Clients are humans, and so are contractors. Be your process. We need to commit first. People do quit. And finally, trust your instincts. So if you're wondering what happened to my daughter, and just because I want to brag about her for a little minute, she's starting 3rd grade next year, and she got accepted into a full immersion gifted and talented program. So I guess she was really bored, still sassy and interrupts people, but we're working on it. So we're really excited about where that's hopefully going to put her in the right place. So if you want to reach out, please do. I'm recently unemployed as of Friday, so I'll be on the streets with my shopping cart. So feel free to call me. Or maybe just taking a couple weeks off for summer and going from there. So any questions? None. That's okay. I won't cry afterwards.
What kind of work are you looking for?
You know, I don't know. I've been managing a team, building websites for a while. I've done a lot of project management, content strategy work, so I'm not sure. I'm really just open. I think I'm going to kayak for a week. Yeah. But we can certainly talk later. Yeah, Tessa.
So you had you mentioned something about a leak fee. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so just writing directly into a contract, the dollar amount that you tend to find expensive. So I've worked a couple different places. I've charged a fee where if you do like an audit or you take on somebody else's website, there's a certain fee. Or if you work on a project and they give it to somebody else and then you pull it back, well, someone's been messing with stuff, right? And so you've got to fix that stuff and get things up to date. So there's always been some fee with that. Why can't there be a fee if the project goes dark for a certain amount of time? Because at a certain point, nobody remembers what you talked about. Like, as a project manager, you have to go through notes and figure out the promises. As a developer, you've got to get everything up to date. So I feel like it's the same thing. It's just like if you launch a site, they go away for a long time and the site hasn't been maintained. It's that point. So trying to figure out what the dollar amount is at, like, you know, I really feel like after 3 months, if there's no activity, that's really challenging to get back into it. But definitely 6 months is kind of a limit. But if it's a problem that happens all the time, so I never had this problem until I went to my last job, and I think it might have something to do with nonprofit, for-profit, and then the size of projects. So I was working on like the 6-figure scale, and now I'm working on the it was more like 30 to 60,000 scale. So I think smaller projects have that problem. And then it happened more with like family run businesses or for-profit stuff. So, you know, money is time and they're making money. So I think that's a really reasonable thing, that if 3 months drops off, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just the same thing as starting a project up. So I've never done it, but I think it's legit. But probably when you read it, it'll be line like 42, so. I'm sure someone's explaining the contract in sales.
I was thinking about the point you were talking about how things don't really change, clients won't really change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the middle of a project right now that is like, we're trying to find the point to confront them about this thing that's not working. Like, okay, after this, we gotta, after this, we'll do it, after that. So we're at that point. It's
yeah.
Like, okay, it's gotta happen now. But I was just kind of wondering, probably like Monday. Do you try and approach those really hard conversations with like your own game plan of here's how it's got to be, or do you like to go into it more as a what are we going to do?
I like to have my options. So like, what am I willing to give up? So if it's something like the budget's going to go over, I want to know, like, am I willing to contribute or not? Okay, what's my line? What am I going to be willing to offer? Do I offer it right away? Do I save it? So I want to know what I try to think through all the scenarios can happen, but then I want it not to be like, here's what we're going to do, da 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 da. I rather have it be a conversation, because when you just put out like, here's what we've noticed, or here's where we're heading, this is the problem. Stop, silence, and clients tend to really quickly like react. So you can either hear like, oh yeah, we've noticed it too. Oh, okay. Or, you know, like, that's our fault, or did you think about this? And so they tend to fill in the space a lot more. But I always like to have my game plan of what I want to do or what I'm willing to do before I get on the phone. But I make the client be part of that decision, because it's a partnership run, right? And they might, I'm always surprised of like, yeah, this has been our fault. I'm like, oh, okay, you've noticed it too. Why have I talked about this sooner? Damn it. Like, so that's what I would do. I just like lead, silence, which is hard for me because I talk a lot. But it's good. I'm working on my cricket skills. Anyone else? Yeah.
So one of your suggestions as a strategy to foster trust potentially with clients was to actually tell them to go and get other bids.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's not something most clients would necessarily expect you to do, and so if you did it, there would be sort of an assumption on their part that you were saying, we don't want to do this job for you. For something, right? Do you have any strategies for communicating? It's not that we aren't necessarily willing to do this for you, it's that you're the problem, right? That we want you
Yeah. I mean, it tends to be, I find it in a situation where you've kind of built up some sort of communication already. So I did this with a church. I knew the pastor of the church. He happened to marry us, and he came to me and said, oh, we're looking at your website. We want to work with you. And I said, you know what? I'll talk to you, but only if you talk to 2 other people. And it partly, I was more bold about it because I knew the guy, but essentially I could be turning away work because they went and got some like real bids. But I said, you need to evaluate, because they didn't know, like, they had no idea about platform or any of that information. And so they needed to do piece by piece to compare us against that. And then they ended up choosing us. But I do find it really important, or especially like I just did a kickoff meeting a couple weeks ago with someone, and I didn't know we were on the brink with them. And they said, well, yeah, we actually went out and got other bids because we just didn't feel like it went so well last time. I'm like, oh, good to know. Super. Thanks for choosing us. They're like, well, I mean, the answer wasn't that great, because the answer was, well, it's better to know who you know. I'm like keep your enemies closer. Like, is that like? But the meeting went really well because they chose us, and if they wouldn't have, I don't think I mean, I don't know how the project will end up, but I think there'd be some problems there. So I think there has to be delicacy about it, and you have to be willing to like let it go, right? Which no salesperson's going to do that. And I'm not a salesperson, so I can say that. But there's definitely situations, especially when it's maybe it's not the perfect match for you either. Like, if it's the golden client, you probably don't want to do that. But if it's the client like, I don't know, then they can decide that, especially if they're jumping platforms or they don't know what they want to be when they grow up, kind of thing. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but it's a hard balance, but I think it comes into the conversation as you're talking to them to kind of realize, like, they need to talk to more people. This is going to be bad for us if we just start doing it. That's when I would throw that in there. And it doesn't happen that often. Like, I wouldn't tell everybody to do that. Cool. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your camp.